Next up, we have Lester Mackey, who's based right here in this town at Microsoft Research in New England. Thanks, Lester.
Thanks. So the question motivating my talk is, how do we convince and equip the next generation of AI researchers to actually work on the pressing social problems of our time? And what I'd like to give you is an imperfect and biased answer to that question in the form of a story, with the hopes that all of you gathered here will come up with a better answer by the end of our time together. So this is a story of Statistics for Social Good. That's a volunteer working group at Stanford University of students, faculty, and researchers dedicated to promoting social good through effective data analysis. And the story begins in 2013 when I joined the faculty at Stanford and learned about this interesting summer program at the University of Chicago called Data Science for Social Good. Their goal was to train data scientists by having them work on actual problems of relevance to the government, the Chicago government, and nonprofits. And I thought, this is a fantastic idea. I'd love to contribute to something like this at Stanford. What can we do like this? Of course, I didn't really know how to get started, so with invoking my usual field bias, I sent out an email to other machine learning and statistics researchers asking them whether they could help me track down organizations and pressing social problems that could benefit from effective data analysis. About 20 people responded to that initial invitation. Most of them were computer scientists and statisticians like me. Most of them had zero experience working on social data problems. And in fact, a number of the students told me that they longed to work on these sorts of problems, but they never really knew how to get started. They'd never really encountered these problems in their classes. They didn't see people working on these problems in their fields, and so they felt that these were not really legitimate problems for AI researchers to be working on. What we ultimately decided to do was to take a divide and conquer approach to the problem-finding problem. Each of us was responsible for reaching out to a particular problem partner. This was an organization, a nonprofit, a government agency, a campus institution, even an individual expert who actually had the expertise to know what the pressing social problems were in his or her domain and to know how better data analysis could influence those problems. The hope for this was that we could learn from the problem partner what the pressing inferential questions were, what the relevant data sources were, and how we as outsiders with some data analysis skills could help them answer these questions in-house. Typically, at the end of a discussion, we would bring the information back to the complete group, the Statistics for Social Good group, form a team around some of the problems that were identified, and start a collaboration. And I should say that most of our cold calls and cold emails didn't go anywhere, but every so often we encountered the right group with the right problem that matched our knowledge and expertise, and that led to some interesting collaborations. So I'll just give you a couple of examples in the minutes that remain. The first is with a program called SparkPoint. It's started by the United Way of the Bay Area. These are centers that provide all sorts of services to low-income individuals to help them meet their financial goals. So they'll give you resume building advice. They'll help you open your first savings account. They'll teach you how to keep your credit score up. And they have very data-driven ways of keeping track of your progress. So they measure your credit scores, they measure your debt levels. Every time you walk into one of the centers, they will keep a record of that interaction. Every time you call or email, they have a record of that interaction. And so they came to us asking, for a given individual with a given target goal, what is the right bundle of services to provide, and in what order should we provide those services? And here's 8 years of data on what we did provide and what the outcomes were. A second example is with several organizations, several campus institutions at Stanford, as well as some partners in Denmark. The goal here was to design interventions for people who would incur large amounts of healthcare costs, but would be able to defer those healthcare costs if they were intervened with. So essentially the first step here was to develop a predictive model of which people were going to incur preventable healthcare costs. And again, we were able to work with a large data set, in this case of 2 million residents of the population of West Denmark from 2004 to 2011. And I'm giving you different examples to show just the variety of problems that we encountered. Each one was completely different. The process to getting to the right questions was completely different. This is to give you some food for thought about how we might organize these sorts of these sorts of teaching experiences in the future. A third is with the Global Oncology Initiative. They are interested in investigating inequities in palliative care, and the very first step was essentially visualizing these inequities in palliative care. So we created for them an opioid atlas that you could go to. There's a link in the slides. And it essentially shows what countries have access to opioids, where's the demand, and where are the gaps. And one last example, this is one of the first projects we worked on. In fact, it was brought in by a master's student at Stanford who was very passionate about helping nonprofits. It's through an organization called Great Nonprofits, which is essentially a ratings database for nonprofits. It helps to match both individuals who are in need of care, people who would like to donate, and people who would like to donate their services, their time to these organizations, to find the right organizations for them. There was a prevailing hypothesis that those who were receiving services from an organization would not rate their organization poorly because they depended on those services, and we were able to debunk that hypothesis. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lester.